I always believed that betrayal didn't happen suddenly. People imagine it as a single moment, a door opening, a text message flashing, a confession forced out of guilt. But in reality, betrayal begins long before the act itself. It begins silently, like a crack forming under paint. You don't notice it until you run your fingers across the wall and feel that something isn't smooth anymore. My name doesn't matter much, because stories like mine happen everywhere to men who think they're doing everything right. I'm 34. I work in logistics, nothing glamorous, nothing that would impress anyone at a dinner party. But I've always been practical, consistent, steady. I believed that steadiness was enough. I believed it meant safety, meant loyalty, meant home. Her name was Anna. We'd been together for 7 years, married for 4. We weren't a perfect couple, but we worked, at least that's what I thought. We had routines, inside jokes, arguments that never escalated into anything dangerous. We liked the same shows. We split chores. We shared passwords. From the outside, we probably looked like people who had figured life out. But cracks formed quietly. I remember the morning it started. Not the betrayal itself, but the moment I realized something was shifting. Tuesday, nothing extraordinary. I'd woken early because a shipment schedule needed correcting. I made coffee for both of us the way I always did, 1 spoon of sugar, a dash of oat milk for her, black for me. I set her mug on the nightstand and saw her phone screen light up. She was still asleep, turned away from me, hair spread across the pillow. The notification banner glowed for a few seconds. Thanks again for yesterday. I needed that. No name, just a number. I don't consider myself jealous. I didn't grab the phone, didn't unlock it, didn't shake her awake and demand answers. I just stood there with the coffee mug in my hand, feeling something unfamiliar crawl under my skin. Something cold, something that whispered, "This isn't normal." I placed the coffee down, got ready, and left for work. But the message stayed with me, like a bitter taste stuck on the back of my tongue. An hour later, she texted me, "Thanks for the coffee. You're sweet, sweet." I used to love when she called me that. Now the word felt like a band-aid covering a crack big enough to swallow us. That evening, she was different, not cold, not distant, just thoughtful, too thoughtful. Like she was weighing her words before speaking, like she was remembering something before responding. I noticed small things: a half-second delay in her smile, a soft sigh when she didn't think I was listening. I asked her about her day. She said it was fine. I asked her if anything interesting happened. She said no, not really. People think lying requires skill. It doesn't. It only requires the hope that the other person won't look too closely. That night in bed, she curled away from me, a habit she never had before. I watched the back of her head for a long time, thinking of that message, thinking of how a simple sentence could rearrange an entire marriage. The next day she left earlier than usual. Said she had a meeting. She worked in marketing. Meetings weren't rare, but early ones were. I didn't question her out loud, but inside questions multiplied like mold. When she came home, she smelled faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. Subtle, but there. I know my own scent, and this wasn't it. She claimed she'd been in a crowded elevator. She laughed it off. She always had a quick answer. Cracks deepened. I should have forced a conversation right then. I should have said, "Look me in the eye and tell me everything is fine." But I didn't, not because I was afraid of the truth, though maybe I was, but because part of me still wanted to trust her, to believe that 7 years meant something stronger than a notification from an unknown number. Trust is a strange thing. It dies slowly, and when it dies, it doesn't collapse, it decays. It leaves residue. It stains everything you look at afterwards. Another message appeared 2 days later, this time while she was in the shower. Can't stop thinking about it. Again, no name. I felt my heart beat in my teeth. My palms went cold even though the bathroom was warm from the steam. I stared at the message until it disappeared into the lock screen again. When she stepped out of the shower, towel wrapped around her, smiling like nothing in the world was wrong. I looked at her and felt something inside me shift permanently. A quiet, irreversible click, like a lock turning. Everything okay? She asked, and I said, yeah, just tired. People betray themselves long before they betray their partners. I spent the next week paying attention in a way I never had before. I noticed how often she placed her phone screen down. I noticed how she stepped into the hallway to answer certain calls. I noticed the new clothes she bought, the sudden interest in late-night work projects, the way she started going to bed with her phone instead of leaving it charging in the kitchen like she always did. None of these things, individually, meant anything, but together they formed a pattern, a shape, a truth. One night, she came home late, much later than she said she would. Her eyes were glassy, her hair slightly messy, her lipstick faded unevenly. I asked her how long she had been working. She hesitated, just slightly, but hesitation is louder than any lie. Long day, she answered. You know how it is. I nodded, but inside, I knew the truth was closing in. The moment everything snapped into clarity came 3 days later. She received a call while we were watching a show together. The phone vibrated in her hand, and she stared at the screen too long before silencing it. She didn't decline it. She didn't answer either. She just froze. I saw her throat tighten, her jaw clench. Who was that? I asked. Spam, she said quickly. Too quickly. I didn't ask again. I just stood up and walked into the kitchen, because if I stayed in that room another second, my silence was going to turn into something much darker. That night, she fell asleep instantly. I didn't sleep at all. At 2:17 a.m., her phone lit up in the dark. I didn't touch it. I didn't open it. I just watched the screen glow. I miss you. I wish tonight didn't end. And that was it. No more cracks. The wall finally collapsed. In that moment, I realized something brutal. Betrayal wasn't the messages. It wasn't the lies. It wasn't even the other man. It was the fact she had created a life where I didn't exist. The next morning, I looked at her while she stood in the doorway, tying her hair into a loose ponytail before leaving. She looked peaceful, innocent even. She kissed my cheek, told me she'd be back early. I didn't flinch. I didn't confront her. I just watched her walk out, because I needed time, not to plan revenge, not to gather evidence, but to figure out how a man is supposed to breathe when the person he gave his life to has already left him emotionally. Weeks ago. This was the beginning, the first part of a story I never wanted to live through, and I knew with painful clarity that everything from this moment forward would change me forever. I woke up the next morning with the same dull weight in my chest I'd gone to sleep with. It wasn't the normal heaviness of stress or work problems. It was sharper, like a thought trying to break through the surface of my mind, insisting I acknowledge it. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet of the apartment. She wasn't home. She had left early again. No note, no message. Just the familiar emptiness of a routine that didn't belong to us anymore. I got up, made coffee I didn't want, stood by the window watching early commuters shuffle to wherever they needed to be, and I wondered how long I'd been pretending that everything was fine, pretending that her late nights meant nothing, pretending that the version of her I fell in love with still lived behind the cold eyes she now saved only for me. I kept replaying yesterday in my head, her tone, her distance, her sudden anger at questions that used to be harmless. I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't trying to accuse her. But the way she snapped, the way she looked almost cornered, that was new. And people don't act cornered unless they've been spending too much time in places they shouldn't. I tried to focus on work, but even there the strange feeling followed me. I typed the same numbers 3 times, misread simple instructions, stared at my screen while my mind ran through every recent moment with her like I was trying to analyze evidence instead of memories. When had that shift happened? When had I started observing her instead of just being with her? It hit me sometime around noon. I'd started watching her movements because something inside me already knew something was wrong. I just didn't want to admit it. Her laughter had changed first. It used to rise naturally warm and unforced, especially when I teased her. Now it was different, lighter, but not in a good way. More controlled. And she didn't laugh with me anymore. She smiled at her phone instead. She turned away when she typed. She angled her screen just enough that I couldn't see little things, small details, but real after work. I didn't want to go straight home, but I went anyway. A part of me wanted to catch her there, wanted to see her in the kitchen, wanted the apartment to feel normal again, just for one evening. But the place was dark, quiet. Only her shoes by the door told me she'd been home at all. I checked the time. She should have been back already. I sat on the couch, replaying the same thoughts. Is she working late again? Did she tell me? Did I just forget? I checked my messages. Nothing. Not even a won't be home for dinner. I stared at the blank screen of my phone for almost an hour, waiting for something, a call, a text, anything that would reassure me. But nothing came. Eventually, I forced myself to eat something, though I barely tasted it. I cleaned the kitchen, paced the hallway, tried watching TV, turned it off after 5 minutes. My thoughts made too much noise for anything else to matter. Around 10, I heard the door unlock. I felt my whole body tighten even though I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just tired. Exhausted from the constant guessing. She came in with her hair slightly messy, cheeks flushed from the cold. Or something else? Her eyes flicked to me, then away. She froze for a second, like she didn't expect me to be sitting in the dark. Oh, she said. Just that one syllable, flat and emotionless. Where were you? I asked calmly, not accusing. Ah, she replied, slipping her bag off her shoulder. I told you I had plans. No, I said quietly. You didn't. She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, then closed it again and brushed past me toward the bedroom. Something in my chest twisted. That same cornered look again, the same avoidance. I followed her, not to fight, but because I needed clarity. I couldn't keep living with this fog around me. Can you just talk to me? I asked. She didn't look up while changing. I'm tired. Can it wait? Can it wait for weeks? Silence. Only the sound of her zipper. Then she snapped, not loudly, but sharply enough to sting. You're suffocating me with all these questions. Stop acting like I owe you explanations for every minute of my life. She said the words like I wasn't her partner, but an inconvenience. A stranger. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I didn't bring up the late nights or the phone she never put down or how she'd started smelling faintly of a cologne I didn't wear. I just stood there, staring at someone who looked like her but no longer felt like her. She went to bed without another word. I lay next to her much later, listening to her steady breathing while mine felt uneven. The divide between us felt physical, a wall built brick by brick out of lies I couldn't prove yet, but felt with every instinct I had. And lying there, I realized something I'd been avoiding. You don't start suspecting the person you love unless they've given you a reason. And she had given me too many. The doubt wasn't something I created. It was something she fed. And for the first time, I let myself admit it. She was hiding something. And whatever it was big enough to change everything. I don't know how people usually describe the moment they finally snap. But for me it didn't come as one loud explosion. It came quietly, like a thread pulling tight inside my chest until it finally tore. And when it tore, everything I had been holding together for months fell apart with it. For days after the discovery, I kept replaying the same inner monologue, trying to understand the exact second my marriage started slipping away. I kept rewinding scenes, analyzing conversations I barely paid attention to when they happened, noticing signs that only make sense when everything is already ruined. I think that's the cruelest part of betrayal. All the clues were there and you didn't see them because you trusted. The house felt different. I don't mean metaphorically. I mean the air itself seemed heavier, like the silence had become physical. We would pass each other in the hallway and she'd flinch just slightly, as if my presence reminded her of something she didn't want to confront. And I I couldn't look at her without feeling a mix of anger, disappointment, and grief that I couldn't put into words. Still, we pretended. Every morning she prepared breakfast like nothing happened. Every evening she scrolled on her phone while pretending to watch TV. It was as if we both signed an unspoken agreement to avoid the truth. One night, when I walked into the living room unexpectedly, she quickly locked her phone and placed it face down on the table. I must have looked at her longer than I thought because she swallowed hard and looked away. That was the first moment I felt something new, not anger, not sadness, just exhaustion. A deep, bone-heavy tiredness. So the next morning, I told her I was taking a few days off work. I didn't tell her why. Honestly, I don't think she wanted to know. I spent the next hours driving. No destination, no purpose, just the road stretching in front of me like an escape route. I didn't realize how many things I had been suppressing until I was alone in that car. The anger came first, sharp, explosive, ugly. Every time I imagined their messages, their secret meetings, my grip on the steering wheel tightened. Then came the sadness, swallowing me whole. I don't remember the last time I cried before that day, but I cried then quietly, the way people cry when they're too tired to fight anymore. When I finally stopped the car, I found myself in an empty parking lot overlooking a valley. I stepped outside, leaned against the hood, and tried to breathe. I kept asking the same question in my head. What am I supposed to do now? I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't looking for a dramatic confrontation. I just wanted my life back, the life I thought I had, the life she tore apart without warning. That evening, when I returned home, she was sitting on the couch, waiting for me. Her eyes were red. Maybe she had cried, or maybe she was just tired too. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. And when she finally did speak, her voice cracked. "Where were you?" she asked. It wasn't concern. It was fear. Not fear of losing me, but fear that I might know more than she wanted me to. "I needed air," I said. Silence. A long, suffocating silence. She looked down at her hands and whispered, "I think we should talk." I almost laughed, a bitter laugh, the kind that doesn't feel like humor at all. Now she wanted to talk. After all this time, after hiding the truth until it cornered her. But I sat down across from her and waited. She hesitated. I watched her decide what version of the story she wanted to give me. Then she took a breath and said, "I made mistakes, but you pushed me away too. You were distant, always busy, always distracted." I felt alone. The words hit hard. Not because they were true, some were, some weren't, but because she used them as a shield instead of admitting what she had done. "So it's my fault?" I asked quietly. "No. I mean, not exactly. I didn't know how to fix things, and cheating was your solution." Her face twisted, not in guilt but in frustration. I didn't plan for it to happen. I leaned back, staring at her. "People say that as if betrayal is something that just falls out of the sky." She looked away. That was the moment I realized something important. She wasn't fighting for us. She was fighting for control, for the version of the story where she wasn't entirely responsible. And that's when the thread inside me snapped completely. I stood up slowly. My voice felt foreign when I spoke. "If you want to keep lying to yourself, fine. But don't lie to me anymore." She opened her mouth, but I didn't wait for a response. I walked to the bedroom, grabbed a suitcase, and started packing. Not out of anger. I was done being angry. This was clarity, cold and sharp. She followed me, panic rising in her voice. "Where are you going? We can fix this." "No," I said, not raising my voice. "You broke it, and you can't fix something you're still trying to hide." She reached for my arm, but I stepped back instinctively, and the realization flashed in her eyes. I didn't trust her touch anymore. When I walked out the door with my suitcase, she stood frozen in the hallway, speechless, and for the first time in months, my chest felt lighter, not healed, not okay, just lighter. Because leaving was the first decision I made for myself in a very long time. I woke up the next morning feeling heavier than I had in years. Not physically, emotionally. Like someone had stacked concrete blocks on my chest while I slept. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, letting the same question loop through my head. What am I supposed to do now? Because after everything I had uncovered, after every message I had read, after every lie I had replayed, the truth still sat in front of me like a wall that refused to move. And I knew the moment I got out of bed, I would have to confront it and her. I sat up slowly, elbows on my knees, hands clasped together. I needed clarity, or closure, or maybe both. Because even though she had betrayed me, even though she had spent months pretending to be someone she wasn't, there was still something inside me that wanted an answer to the one question I couldn't shake. Why? When I finally walked out into the kitchen, she was already there, standing by the counter, holding a mug she wasn't even drinking from. She looked up as soon as she heard my footsteps. For a second, neither of us said anything. The silence was loud, too loud. I didn't think you'd want to talk, she finally said. Her voice was small, like she was bracing herself for impact. I took a breath. I don't want to fight, I said, but I need to understand what happened. Not the excuses, not the half-truths, the real reason. She set the mug down and rubbed the back of her neck. I don't know if I can give you one clear reason. I messed up. I ruined everything. I know that. That's not enough, I said. You didn't just make a mistake. You built an entire life on top of a lie. With me? She exhaled sharply and leaned against the counter. I felt distant. From myself. From us. And instead of talking to you, she shook her head. I escaped. Into something that was never supposed to become real. Something in me snapped at that. But it did become real. For months. And you let me walk around this apartment thinking everything was fine. Her eyes started to water. I know, for a moment, watching her fall apart, I felt something strange. Not forgiveness, not even close, but an understanding of how deep her confusion ran. She didn't know what she wanted, and she had chosen the most destructive path possible. I'm not here to yell at you, I said. I just want to know if you ever planned to tell me. If I hadn't found what I found, would you have kept going? She hesitated. And that was my answer long before she spoke. I don't know, she whispered. I nodded slowly. Then we're done, she broke. Completely. She reached out like she wanted to touch my arm. But I stepped back instinctively. And something in her face changed, like she finally understood the finality of what I had said. I never wanted to lose you, she said. Her voice barely audible. You lost me the moment you decided I wasn't worth honesty, I replied. I'm not walking away because I hate you. I'm walking away because I still respect myself. She covered her face with her hands, but I didn't go to her. I couldn't. I walked back to the bedroom and grabbed the small suitcase I had packed earlier. Not my whole life, just enough to walk out the door without turning back. I didn't trust myself to stay longer than necessary. When I walked past her toward the exit, she lowered her hands and looked at me with red, swollen eyes. Is this really it? Yes, I said, but I hope you learned something from all of this. Not for me, for yourself. I walked out, quietly, no slamming doors, no dramatic shouting, no final bitter comments. Just the sound of my footsteps and the cold air waiting for me outside. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something like clarity. Not peace. Not relief, but certainty. I had no idea what my life would look like next week, next month, next year. But I knew one thing for sure. I would never again let someone treat honesty like an optional part of a relationship. That was my final decision, my final boundary, my final word.